Download the AllStar app. Make your picks for UFC fights, challenge your friends, level up and win prizes. Link in description. Get it now.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Colton Kielbasa here, coming from Phuket, Thailand, here at Southside MMA. I'm from Chicago originally, but now I live here full time. From like a blue collar neighborhood, all police, all firemen in my neighborhood, Irish Catholic neighborhood. I'm not Irish, but Irish Catholic neighborhood. Grew up like drinking, fighting, throwing snowballs at cars, having fun, like going out with the boys, hanging out. I grew up wrestling, and then wrestled in high school, and then wrestled in the Marine Corps as well. Yeah, so I wrestled in 6th grade, and then I started out, and actually I had some injuries starting out, right? I broke my not my collarbone, my shoulder blade, like up here when I was young, and that took me out for a season. And then my 8th grade year, before high school, going into high school, I broke a vertebrae in my back. And then actually like was told like, hey, you can't wrestle, you're not gonna be wrestling for 6-8 months or something. And I was like, fuck that, like I wanna wrestle. So I pushed through, like took maybe 1 or 2 months out, came back at the end of the season, and then kept wrestling again, trying to make state. And then going into high school, I played football as well going into high school. And then football was like my first love. Like I love football, especially like fucking hard contact sport. Like I love just fucking cracking dudes. I loved it. And then obviously I'm not the tallest person, so I'm not the biggest. So I was like, all right, I gotta stick to wrestling because that's where my bread and butter, and that's what I love to do. Yeah, so throughout high school, I was a decent wrestler. I definitely wasn't the best, but I worked, man. Like I'm not afraid of hard work, and so I worked my fucking ass off in high school going into wrestling. And then my senior year, made state and everything, like almost placed in state. In Illinois from Chicago, it's a very good state to wrestle in. And then after that, I was like, okay, I wanted to keep wrestling. I knew if I went to college, I would have just been a booze head. I would have fucking drank all the time and probably not wrestled so much, right? So I was like, okay, I wanted to keep wrestling, but I didn't really know how. And then one of my coaches on a wrestling team, he wrestled in the Marine Corps as well. And so he said like, hey, you know you could wrestle in the military. And I was like, fuck, like sick, that's a done deal. I'm going to the Marines. And then once I made it to the Marines, it was, all right, like you go through boot camp, and then you go through like your training for your job, and then you go to your initial like duty station. And then once I got to my duty station, it was all like, all right, I gotta figure out how do I get onto this wrestling team? Because at the time, there was the Marine Corps wrestling team. Now it's discontinued, but they used to have the Marine Corps wrestling team. And then, yeah, so it was all about figuring out how to get on there. And then I drove from Virginia to North Carolina, like a 4-hour drive to wrestle in a tournament. And I won the tournament, and then the team invited me to come join the team. And then you just got to get approval from your unit. And then from there, I joined the team for a short period. And then I went back to my unit, and that's when I started training MMA and jiu-jitsu types of things. Like, so being a wrestler, fucking boot camp's easy. That shit, like, it's a cakewalk. If you're a wrestler, especially from a good program, good school, good coaches, like, you're used to getting yelled at, you're used to fucking running upstairs for hours, sprawling for an hour if you you're used to that shit. So boot camp was very easy. The Marine Corps was easy, but I really enjoyed it, and you learn a lot. Like, not just like, some people say like, oh, you get out of the military, you don't have any skills, but like, if you apply yourself in the military, you get out with a lot of skills that you can use in life. And I use them now to coach. Like shit that I learned in the Marines, I use for fighting to help me stay disciplined and shit like that. And as well as coaching, right? Like in the Marine Corps, you're taught how to teach. And then I was taught how to teach. And then I picked up roles, and so then I was a leader and I was in charge. So then I had to teach people how to teach, right? So that translates well to now if I help out with coaching or if I coach and stuff, it really helped translate to that aspect of my life now, fighting, coaching, and living here in Thailand. In Virginia is where I was stationed. And in Virginia, I started going to an MMA gym there, and I started training. And mostly before I was on the Marine team, I went there till I was like, all right, I wanted to stay in shape so I could keep wrestling. And then when I came back from the wrestling team, I went straight back to the MMA gym and I started training more jiu-jitsu and a little bit, very little striking. And then I was like, okay, like I want to fight. I want to figure this out and try fighting. I mean, yeah, having a wrestling background is like huge, you know, like you see it all the time. Wrestlers transition to MMA and they're good at it, right? I don't want to say easy, but like being in shape for the sport, MMA, helped with the Marines, and then vice versa. Being in shape for the Marines helped with training for MMA, being in shape for MMA, right? Like, when I was in Virginia, right, I had like a squad and I was in charge of a bunch of guys, and I led the PTs, right? So basically, in the morning PT, like 6 a.m., 5:30, some shit like that, like I would be in charge of leading the PTs, and then I would lead it, and it would basically almost be like an MMA session. Like I would teach these guys like wrestling and jiu-jitsu and like shit like that. And then, so I would use that as well as what I know from like the MMA side and what you learn, and you mix it, you know, you kind of go with what you got. So like to rewind a little bit, when I got out of high school, I knew I was going into the Marines, but I kind of wanted to have my summer and like go out, party. I would visit like some friends in colleges and shit and like enjoy myself a little bit before I went to the Marines. And then during that time, I coached as well. So I started like helping out with one of the local high schools, like coaching friends, mostly friends that were years younger than me, but I would help coaching there. And yeah, so that coaching aspect definitely helped when you get to the Marines, because if you're in good shape, if you know how to lead and like motivate people, you're automatically like usually ahead of your peers in the Marines, right? And then, like I said, you were taught how to teach, how to coach in the Marines. Like they really focus on that. And so I took that to coaching. When I was at the MMA gym, I helped coach the wrestling there. And then when I came to Thailand, like I was at Team Quest initially in Chiang Mai, and then I would help coach the wrestling there. And then from there, I went to Marak Gym in Bangkok, right? And I was coaching there as well with like a lot of good fighters. And so you get like coaching and fighting, it kind of goes hand in hand. And some people are like, I don't want to say afraid to coach and fight at the same time, but like don't want to coach and fight at the same time because they kind of mix and maybe one interrupts the other. But I see it like differently. You get like different perspectives. When I was in Bangkok, there was a time when for 6 months straight, I was at a fight event every week for 6 months straight. Either I was coaching somebody, I was in the corner, or I was fighting, or I was just going to watch a friend fight. So like that makes it like easier to, the more you're around fight events, the easier it is to when you go to fight, and maybe those nerves aren't there. You've seen like the backstage nerves from your good friend about to fight. Like that's fucking, to me, that I get more nervous when I watch my friend about to fight and I'm in their corner versus when I fight. The reason I got out of the military was because I wanted to be a full-time fighter, right? Like I probably could have stayed in and did well in the Marines, but it was not impossible, but very hard to fight while you're in the Marines. One, because of the time it takes to do your normal job, and then also like technically we weren't allowed to fight. Like if we got injured fighting, like we could get in trouble in the Marine Corps. And then so I got out of the Marines, and literally 2 weeks afterwards, I was in Thailand, like straight away. And those 2 weeks, like I went home, went back to my parents' house, and then I was training full time. So I immediately started training full time, like 2-3 sessions a day. Yeah, so I'm a wrestler, right? So wrestling and jiu-jitsu kind of, I don't want to say come easy, but like it's easier, it's more natural for me to grapple and stuff. So Thailand was like, the striking, Thailand's Muay Thai, right? So the striking aspect of fighting is in Thailand. And some guy I followed like on Instagram, and he came to my gym in Virginia, Paul Banasic, the Reaper. Like he's been in Thailand a long time, and I followed him on Instagram, and I was like, damn, he's living in Thailand, like he's a good striker. Fuck, let's go to Thailand. Let's work on my striking. Team Quest. When I first came to Thailand, I went straight to Chiang Mai because Paul was at Team Quest. He trained at Team Quest, and that's who I followed on Instagram. And so I was like, fuck, go to Team Quest, and I picked it there. And then when I got there, like met like really good people, really good friends I still have to this day. It was a good team too as well at the time. And then yeah, since I haven't looked back, and I've been in Thailand since. I was at Team Quest, and then COVID happened, and then so Team Quest kind of shut down, like no customers and everything. So I was with Jack was, so it was me, Jack Ferguson, and then Christoph Kirsch, bare knuckle fighter. We were kind of like the last 3 or 4 guys like at the gym, you know. And Jack went to Bangkok and went to Maroc because he had Will and was an fuck's he from? He's from Chile. Will was at another Team Quest guy. He was at Maroc, right? And so Jack went there with Will, and then Jack was like, hey, like they need a wrestling coach here, and we need like good coaching. Like they have good guys, good team, but they need a wrestling coach. So I was like, oh fuck, this is a good opportunity. So I went from Team Quest in Chiang Mai, and I moved to Bangkok and went to Maroc. And then shortly afterwards, Chris came from Team Quest to Maroc, right? And then again, me, Jack, and Chris were at Maroc together. It was, I loved Maroc. Like when it first came, it was fucking awesome. It was me, Jack, Chris, Peter was there, Peter Denzel. We kind of brought Peter along from Team Quest as well. And then we had like the Filipinos, right? Like Denise, Jeremy, Fritz, Drex. The Brazilians were there too. We had Carlos, Jonathan, Pedro. Like we had a fucking sick team. And during COVID, we like there's a gym, and then next to the gym was like the fighter housing. Man, it was fucking awesome. It was just like, we called it the prison because there was like cages on the outside door, and it was a fun time. Like living right next to the gym in Bangkok during the middle of COVID, like all fighters at this house, it was fucking fun. No fights were going on, but we were training hard still, but also enjoying Bangkok. Maroc was awesome, man. Like we had a fucking sick team. Like I said, like Nat Wondergirl was there as well, right? And then we had Pechanong, now former world champion, right? He was like our kind of strength and conditioning coach, head coach. We had a sick boxing coach, Poya Rokna. DJ Jackson was there as well, right? So we had a very good team. Dakota Hope, now he's in Pattaya, right? So like we had all these guys at this team, and then it just didn't work out, right? Like the people move along and life happens, you know? And so people move, and then DJ came here. And then at that time, so when DJ came here, I was splitting my training between Maroc and MTA with like Poya Rokna, the boxing coach, because Poya worked at Maroc and at MTA, so I'll go to both. And then it was like, all right, like I don't want to focus. We didn't have too many guys on the team anymore, you know? So I was like, I don't want to focus 100% on coaching. I really want to focus on fighting. And I was like, well, Phuket, if you're an MMA fighter, you got to be in Phuket. Like the amount of bodies here, the level of MMA fighters in Phuket is probably the most concentrated level of high-level MMA fighters in the world outside of like Florida, right? Like I would put Miami, you got a lot of good teams here, but Phuket, I would put 1 or 2, like they're neck and neck. So that's what led me to coming to Phuket. Like DJ moved here, so, and then Nat moved here as well, and then yeah, we kind of just went from there. So when I initially went to Maroc, I still hadn't made my pro debut, but I was coaching the wrestling, and I was really like, I was coaching there a lot. And then it was during COVID, so we were still working, we were still like training hard every day, and I worked a lot with my boxing coach, Poya. And then I was like, fuck, like I need to fight. Me and Chris, we were like, we need fights. I want to fight, I want to make my pro debut. And I'm like, all right, how do we make that happen? Let's figure it out. So Chris is German. He went back to Germany for a little bit, and then he's messaging me. He's like, yo, bro, like there's fucking shows here. You can get on shows here. Like come to Germany. I'm like, you know, maybe not, maybe. So eventually I went to Germany, and then we basically stayed in gyms for like a couple weeks. And then we made our way to Denmark, where we stayed on a junkyard in like almost the middle of winter, and fucking, it was awesome. It was like me and Chris training, and then we were coaching as well at like a small local gym in Denmark. Me and Chris would train together, and then we would work on the junkyard. It was like a steel mill too, so we worked on the steel mill. And then in between training, we'd work, and then train and then coach. And then that's when I made my pro debut on LFL in Amsterdam. It was a fight that just popped up, and I was like, it was on like 2 weeks notice or like 10 days or some shit. I'm like, yeah, let's go. Like, I want to make my pro debut. Like, let's get it done. And honestly, it wasn't the best training. Like, Chris fights at 155, and he's tall as shit, right? And I'm small, and I fight at 125. But we made do, and it was awesome. Like, we went to LFL, we went to Amsterdam. I've never been there, he's never been there. And we both fought on the show. And he wasn't supposed to fight, but then the main event pulled out, and it was against Murtho Gronhart, who is like a Glory kickboxing world champ. And Chris on like 2 hours notice was like, I'm fighting, like fuck it, let's do it. And so me and Chris fought on the show. It was awesome. Noel was there too. Noel fought on the same show as well. It was, honestly, it was a fucking blast. Like living in a junkyard in Denmark with a very good friend, traveling around, fighting in Europe, punching people in the face for money. It's fun, man. Yeah, so like being active, that's my short-term goal. It's this next fight, and I worry about that, and then I'll worry about everything else after that, right? Like I don't want to like, you kind of got to plan ahead, right? Like you got to plan ahead to a certain extent, but also you're only as good as your last fight, right? Like I just fought in Bali 2 weeks ago, and I won, but 3 weeks before that, I fought here in Sinbi at M2 MMA, and I lost. And I was like, fuck that. I had a sour taste in my mouth, so I wanted to get it right back, and so I fought in Bali. And then when I got back from Bali, probably like the next day, we're like, hey, we got this offer on internal, you want it? And I'm like, step on the scale. Yeah, fuck it, I'm not too heavy, let's go, let's take it. Yeah, anybody who supports me, like especially like here, Sammy Cassidy, like really fucking helps me out a lot. Like Eric Tewaz Striking really fucking helps me out. Like working with Campbell, like all these guys really helped me out. Like all my coaches and even friends back home. Like my manager Vince is somebody I've known since I was fucking 10 years old, and now he's a manager. And like, so it's good to have people that you've trusted work with you now later on in your career, right? So just thank you everybody who's fucking supports me. I love it.